to the Hoop Show. I'm your host, Chad Cook with AUG B-Ball. And with us, as always, this week is Marcus Shockley from BasketballElite.com. And a special guest this week, Stephen Barnhart. And you can find Stephen on Twitter, and his handle is @HWHoopsCentral. Welcome, Marcus, and welcome, Stephen. Let's get right into it and talk about some of the biggest news of the week. Desmond Wells, who's a freshman at Xavier last year, going into his sophomore year as Xavier's top returning player. And he has been dismissed from the team, and he's actually has committed and is going to Maryland. And we'll talk a little bit about what happened with all of that in a second. But first, let's have a quick question. Little housekeeping. Marcus, will he be able to play right away for Maryland?
We don't really know yet. I think the NCAA hasn't really made a ruling or a decision. As of right now, the thinking is he will be able to play, but I don't know if they'll look at it as a transfer because he was expelled. So I think they're just kind of playing a waiting game and hoping that he can play right away.
Okay. Yeah. Now, you mentioned being expelled, and there's not a lot of details as far as the reason for the expulsion, except for violating rules. I think there was a grand jury that dismissed the case after the decision was made. But there was an article in one of the papers that highlighted the fact that Xavier used to be a mid-major program, one that made noise every once in a while, and lately it's become a major player on the high major scene. And what this author said was basically when you make the decision to do that, you're going to get guys that, I don't know if he called it low character, but he kind of made that kind of statement. Now I will say that I've read a lot of good things about Desmond Wells. Dave Tellup, I think Marcus actually has fine things to say about him. So I'm not here to condemn Desmond Wells by any means, but let's start with that topic. Stephen, do college basketball programs, in order to compete at the highest level, do they have to take maybe what some people might call low character guys, or is that a cop-out?
Well, you don't have to take low character guys. And of course, obviously, the less that you have to worry about off the court, the better you are as a program. Because, as they say, any publicity is good publicity, but that's not so true when it comes to athletics on the college level. You start to get sanctions and talk about those sorts of things that can really hinder you going forward. Unfortunately, it is, sometimes true where, you get 4 and 5 star guys who unfortunately have been raised to believe that because they are the high school, star that they are, or, that they're essentially above everything, they've been brought up to think that, well, because I have this talent, I can go ahead and get away with having lower grades or, getting in trouble. Or if I get in trouble, the local police will recognize me and they'll turn their head. Now, I don't mean to say that as a generality as far as all programs, all high school, programs across the country, but it is unfortunate and does happen. So these guys sometimes get this mentality of invincibility, and it's unfortunate because you're already young, you already don't know better to a certain degree, and now you're being told by people who are older than you, adults, teachers, coaches, that, hey, as long as you continue to be good at this sport, we're essentially going to watch out for you. Now, they might not say that verbatim, but their actions do go in that direction.
Now, speaking of, top programs, recruiting, things like that, our next topic, I wanted to talk about player rankings. At this time of the year, there's not a whole lot to do basketball-wise. We're all just waiting for football to get over so we can get back to the hardwood. So things like whether this high school kid is ranked number 1 or number 2 or number 3. So, for instance, I think Julius Randle and Jabari Parker have been talked about even on this show. Who's number 1? Who deserves the top spot? Things like that. And so, with you two guys, I'd love to get your opinions separately about that. And do rankings matter? Marcus, when it comes down to it, if a guy from Chicago is ranked number 1 and a guy from Texas is ranked number 2, does that matter?
I would say on the surface, no, it doesn't matter. And I think a lot of people have known me over the years. I really don't like rankings that much. I say that, and of course, there are some rankings on my site and on Basketball Elite. And one of the things we've always tried to do is we try to rank players based on what colleges will call us and ask us about. So let me be clear about that. The first thing is that most players care about rankings far more than any college cares about rankings, and most fans of schools, so like fans of Kentucky, Kansas, UCLA, they care about rankings more than the college coaches do. Those rankings that they care about are relatively meaningless. Like whether Jabari Parker is ranked over Julius Randle, that's strictly for media, that's strictly for fans. I will tell you that, and this was an education that happened to me, when college coaches have called me to ask me about rankings, specifically, usually they have 3 or 4 players that they're calling about by name, and they will say, which one of these guys would you put over the other? So if they call and they have 3 point guards and they give me their names, and they'll say, how do you rank these 3 guys? That's the difference, because suddenly it matters, because they're talking about how that player is going to fit in on the court, what kind of character that player has, how I've seen that player play or not. If I'm suddenly having to make a distinction, which point guard would I want on my team? That means I would have had to see that guy, and I would have to really make a coaching decision.
Right, right. Now, Stephen, because Marcus mentions coach calling and saying, "I'm looking at these 3 guards. Which one do you like the best?" What he's really saying, in my opinion, there is, if you're in my shoes, who would you bring in if you had your choice? So really, that's a kind of a competitive question. Where do you weigh in on this topic?
Well, from where Marcus is coming from, I would agree. If a coach called me and said, where does this guy stand at from a credibility standpoint, or how would he fit in our system? Which would you, knowing, because in order to be in Marcus's shoes, you have to develop relationships with these coaches, so you know their systems, you know what kind of guys they want. That's different than taking 100 guys and then trying to find out where they rank best in their class. To me, if you're just going to rank them all, what does it really matter? It's all the same. So going from an old school perspective, it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to look at a guy and say, well, you rank this and you rank this, so clearly you're going to play better if you got the higher ranking and you're supposed to play less.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'm hearing you guys say is that coaches use people like you, recruiting professionals, and just their network of people that they know, to try to be in more than one place at one time. So if they could be everywhere and see every matchup from every different angle, they wouldn't need any help, but they can't. So they ask people, what do you think? You know about my system. We've built this relationship. What do you think? Can I get your opinion? And so in that world, I would think that a ranking is, at best, one of the tools in the toolbox that maybe helps them filter down. Okay, let me call Marcus and talk about 5 point guards because I see them on the ranking here. Maybe they're within my geographical area, so I might have a shot at them. I might have knowledge that they're going to be playing at this tournament in my area sometime soon, so I want to know whether or not I should go look at them, things like that. Okay, Stephen, so thank you for joining us. And before we go, I want you to tell us about what you have coming up in the Florida area and beyond. I know that you cover the nation as a whole when it comes to recruiting.
Hardwood Hoop Central is a nonprofit organization, and what I do is I'll recruit just about any guy in the country that a coach brings me. I don't do what a lot of scouting services do, where they say, well, I'm just going to focus on the D1 and D2 guys. I understand that a kid who is a top athlete is going to automatically get phone calls. So he doesn't have to figure out how to get recruited, because people are going to automatically call him. People are going to automatically show up to his games, AAU tournaments, showcases, etc. But for those guys that are, and don't get me wrong, I look at those guys as well. I mean, I don't exclude them. But let's say on a high school level, you're fortunate enough to have 3 or 4 D1, D2 guys. So that leaves 8 guys who don't know how to get recruited, may have the talent to play maybe at the JUCO level, NAIA level, D3 level, but they don't know what to do. Nobody's in their ear saying, hey, pick your grades up. Hey, shoot a few extra 100 jumpers this week so you can improve that jumper so it becomes easier for you to get scouted. Nobody's telling them that. Hardwood Hoop Central is going straight to the coaches and saying, no matter what level this guy can play on, let me get their information. Let me sit down and talk to you, and I'll get information from coaches. I'll do interviews with coaches to figure out strengths and weaknesses. I'll find out what guys are working on in the gym. And I'll put together a package and a profile to include in our free national scouting report that right now goes out to close to 200 schools that range from the high major D1 level all the way down to the JUCO level and everything in between. With the Twitter site, I'm always getting guys to send me their basketball mixtapes, highlight tapes, and I'll tweet them out to coaches. And just last night, I tweeted out 3 or 4 videos, and I had a couple coaches contact me on guys that they saw and wanted more information. During the season, I'll cover games through our Hardwood Hoops Central blog that can be found at hardwoodhoopscentral.blogspot.com. And I'll cover games, AAU tournaments, showcases, and just kind of give you a breakdown. And I'll even cover programs. Hardwood Hoop Central is all about, as I like to say, about eating, breathing, and sleeping the hardwood. So that's what we aim to do.
Great, great. Well, you've been a great guest. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Marcus, for joining us. And we will be back next week for the Hoop Show.